What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Tripp. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. I'm joined today by Mr. Steve Richards from the CEO Nation. How's it going today, Steve?
Good, man. I'm excited to be here and can't wait to do this with you.
I Anytime I hear someone start talking about mindset, I get nauseated at that just because I've read all the books. I've gotten to the point where I'm done reading these books because they're all regurgitated the same kinds of things. I want to put a little kind of different twist on it today. Um, a lot of, I've known you for a few years now, and ever since I've known you, we don't really even talk about real estate. Like we've talked about real estate very little. We've talked about the things that kind of lead you into being good at real estate, and I want to kind of steer things in that direction. And because I feel like right now, Steve, a lot of people that have maybe been in real estate for a little while that I've been talking to, they're kind of searching. They're kind of looking for something different. They're some sort of transition is going on in their lives. They're unhappy. Maybe they got to the top of the mountain, like I kind of did, and then a big life event happened, or it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. There's a big need here, and I don't think we're talking about this in the way that it needs to be talked about. So I'm not just going to sit here and talk about mindset. We can do the old regurgitated, books and things that people talk about all the time, but just real briefly I got a lot of very specific questions before we get into any of that. Just kind of, Steve, if you don't mind, just take 60 seconds, a couple minutes, tell everybody who you are, tell everybody what's your kind of your background, what even
Mhm.
qualifies you to talk about some of the things that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, man. Uh, first I'll get the most important thing out of the way. We had a big long conversation before we hopped on that my lighting is bothering me because I'm all washed out. So my hair is not quite as gray as it looks, but I am almost 50 years old. So right there qualifies me to know some stuff because I've just lived on this planet longer than probably a bunch of people that watch this video. But I live in Indianapolis. I'm in that market. And I went to business school, traditional in my 20s after high school, got out, did .com consulting, tech consulting in the late 90s. And that was really cool. And I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug at that point because I was watching people get all this venture capital and I was helping they're like, I got an idea on a napkin and I don't know what to do with it, and I didn't know what I was doing. And we're charging them they go raise a few $1 million and they come spend it with our company and we make like websites and then no one ever made any money. And so it was interesting. I was like, what? I learned at a very early age, like ideas don't matter that much and everybody's got one. And it was an interesting time. There was obviously the Y2K thing in the tech world at that time. Everyone thought the computers were going to blow up and the world was going to end. Um, Everyone also thought there's no money to be made on the internet, which is hilarious. The first startup I did with my entrepreneurial spirit when it got lit really was LinkedIn and Facebook before that was even a thing.
Hmm.
And we had a lot of traction. We were trying to raise money, and everyone's like, hey, couple problems. You're in Indianapolis. You can't run a tech company from Indianapolis. Secondly, you don't have like a 50 or 60-year-old dude who's done this before on your board or in your management team. So you don't know what you're doing. And thirdly, if you didn't hear, we found out the internet is just brochureware. You don't make money on it. You can't monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, those are conversations I'm having. I'm like, oh, so it requires an old person so young people can't do this on their own. No money on the internet. Like, I was feeding all this BS, but it was an interesting 6, 7 years, like out of college and going through all that before I got into real estate. And I really got my entrepreneurial spirit lit during that time. I also met a lot of people. I learned a lot of things. What's interesting is I'll circle back to this. I got a lot of seeds planted in me and what not to do
Mm-hmm.
with business. And I didn't really understand how powerful having a business degree, which I didn't think much of it was applicable when I got in the real world. And then being around all these businesses that we were consulting with, I didn't realize how much I was absorbing at that time that like literally I still talk to clients about today as a coach. I mean, it's crazy. I'm like, oh, I learned this 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is real stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. And so when I got into real estate, I just met a guy and he's like, hey man, I just spent 40 grand on seminars and my dad and I were going to do this and my dad's not showing up. I sent a bunch of mailers out. People will give you their house for free. I'm like, no, they don't.
Hmm.
Yeah, they'll deed it right over to you. And if you don't have any money, you just put an ad in the paper. That's how old I am. And just say you're looking to pay 15% if someone loans you money, and people will just loan you money on promissory notes. I'm like, wait, people just give you money and then people will deed their house to you? He's like, yeah, yeah. I mean, he had been to Ron LeGrand
Mhm.
and guys that people on this podcast have never heard of, Chris Kirschner, and there was big people back then. Um, and it was interesting because I was like, all right, I'm in. He handed me like 5 or 6 3-ring binders, and they were full of CDs. There weren't even DVDs. They were literally CDs. There were a few tapes that I listened to in my car as well. I had a tape player in my car still.
I was just about to say, because but right around the same time you're talking about late 90s, early 2000s, I kind of got in, well, really late 90s. I got into Amway for a minute and I got handed a big binder of cassette tapes.
Yep. Yep. That was the
I know
thing for
I know what you're
sure.
talking about. Yeah.
If guys, if you're watching this and you don't know what a cassette tape is, we'll do another podcast on Betamax and VHS and stuff later. But kidding aside, that was kind of the my background and context, business school, tech consulting. And I fell into real estate thinking like, hey, what's the worst thing is I'll buy a couple rental properties and I own them for 20 years. When I don't even have kids yet. But I'm thinking once I probably gonna have kids soon. I was recently married at the time. Um, by the way, just to gauge everybody, I was around 30 when this happened, when I got into real estate. Or it was actually 20, just turned 29. But I was married to have kids, and I thought this there's no downside to buying some rentals. So we started going out, and that's a whole nother story. But the bottom line is somehow 6 months later, I'm ready to quit my corporate job, which was a really good, pretty cushy. I was the director of IT for a company. I'd gotten out of consulting, went to one of my clients, was helping build their tech department, and had a really nice, high 6-figure job with benefits. And I was brain dead. I was literally like driving into work and I could just get it done without having to worry about it and drive home. But I was wanting to hit my head against the window, the whole way in the car. And I'm starting to listen to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm changing my mind and learning new things. And that was the beginning of mindset for me, was like understanding things like how powerful information is
Hmm.
when it's utilized
Hmm.
to expand your mind, but also how futile ideas and information is if you just sit on it, right? Like I didn't know what I was learning, but I was starting to like put that stuff together, and I had a business background. All these things are coming together later in life. But I got into real estate 6 months in. I realized back then, you could fog a mirror. They'll give you as much money as you want. And when you buy a house, you can just overfinance it. So I was buying rentals and, financing an extra 10 grand every time. So I'm buying a house a month, making 10 grand a month off the financing,
Hmm.
the burr kind of thing out of the gate, but you didn't even have to buy it and refinance it. I could literally like get an appraisal above my purchase price and take the money out then, it was crazy.
Hmm.
Um, within 6 months of that, I quit my job, started flipping about 5 houses a month within the first 6 months of being in the business, and rehabbing and doing the normal thing, like hiring contractors and all that. The first, over the next 10 years, I built a business that got into turnkey really heavy. And the first 500 or 600 houses I flipped, it was a job. I didn't realize I was a solopreneur. I was self-employed. I had a lot of people working for me. I had a bank account, a lot of clients, a lot of business, a 3,000 square foot office with triple crown molding and like built-in speakers and like marble, counters in the entryway. Like it was pretty awesome. We had a lot of stuff, but I didn't have a business. I just had a bunch of stuff a business has or does. I didn't have a business, which is really, the CEO Nation, my coaching business, really the heart of that is understanding that you got to understand what your business model is, but you also got to understand who you are and put those things together, build systems, processes, and, KPIs and all these, and how to hire, not, asking your friend's cousin's boyfriend to come work for you from church, because you don't think you can afford anybody. All that kind of stuff was going on that I was figuring out that I didn't know how to run business. And so about 10 years ago, about 10 years into owning the real estate business. I read Traction before anybody had really gotten big in that book. Somebody handed it to me, luckily, at a Infusionsoft conference, by the way, which is another
Wow.
blast from the past. Simon Sinek was talking. His book Starts
Wow.
with Why had just come out. So that blew my mind. And then I was reading Core Values and all these other things that are in Traction. And I had a early midlife crisis. And anyway, all that background, the next almost 1,000 houses I flipped, I flipped twice as many the second 10 years, and I did it without rehabbing very few. Didn't have to deal with tenants the same way anymore. We were managing about 350 houses kind of at the end of my first 10 years. We were doing 20 rehabs at a time. We had a construction company, a property management company, a brokerage.
Mm.
I had all of that with no integrator in my life. I was just a entrepreneur, visionary running amok. And every time something wasn't going well, I started a new business to cover up the one that was broke, instead of fixing the one I had.
Mm.
And, and I course corrected all that. But during that time, I think to lean into maybe to set up some of the questions, I didn't just take a step back and realize I need to shut down this business. I realized I don't know what I want. And so
Ah,
largely for the next 8 years, I was just building what my clients said they would pay me to do. I was doing what I saw other people doing. I
right.
had a RIA and people are like, dude, you're awesome. I'm like, I guess I better keep doing the stuff people think I'm awesome for. Cause
Yeah.
I guess it's awesome to manage all these houses and have, all this stuff going on. But we've talked about this, Brian, but I went on a tear. It was really hard to shut all that stuff down. And, I had a nurse practitioner. I was 245 pounds. I've gotten down in the 190s now literally almost, I'm like 35% of the body fat that I used to be. Like 2/3 of my body fat's gone. I'm like 5 times stronger than I was. My blood work is so much better. My hormones are balanced. So I went to a nurse practitioner. I went to a doctor. I had an Enneagram coach. I had a life coach. I had a therapist. We had a family counselor.
At
Uh,
how long ago did all this start?
10, that was roughly 11 years ago when I
So,
had this, when I just knew I needed to figure out who I was and what I wanted.
okay, so that's really interesting. So you not only from a business standpoint, you're sitting here taking us through kind of how you got into real estate. And so it's not only from a business standpoint, someone hands you traction, you start to learn how to become a CEO, learn how to actually own and run a business versus owning a job. It wasn't just a business transformation, you were starting like a life transformation too.
Yeah.
At 40,
I'm,
it sounds like, or maybe late 30s.
yeah, 39.
Yeah.
It was about 10 years in. Got in at 29. It's 39. And so I'll jump into the end. Now we own several businesses and we do things very differently. And over the last 5 or 6 years, I've started coaching people a lot, but I'm also on the board of directors of two of the biggest masterminds in the country. And so one of those is not just investors, it's actually coaches and gurus, right? And they all have 500 to 5,000 clients. So my point is, it's been interesting because I was so lost in the weeds in myself and not knowing who I was and what I was doing the first 10 years, but the last 10 years, not only have I been focused on who I am and what I want, but I've got myself into a position to help a lot of other people to where they become vulnerable. And I've coached hundreds of people and I'm exposed to literally tens of thousands of people through the other, people in these masterminds that we help run. And then the other mastermind, I run hot seat rooms, and every quarter I have 40 people pour their heart out about their whole business in front of me. And so all that exposure it's tremendous to get to see what everyone else is going through.
Yeah.
And I've boiled it down to, we're all going through 2 or 3 of the same things. Like there's 100 million problems that everybody thinks they have or opportunities. And I'll tell you this, and when I said I'm jumping to the end, like what you just asked me, I'll answer by saying this. What I realize now is what I didn't know then until really recently in the last like year or so, um, through some deep spiritual awakening and journeys that we might get into. Um, everything in life is a mirror, and our business is just a big, huge mirror. And we think it's employees and clients and revenue and financials and all this stuff. And it is. But what it also is just a reflection of how you're showing up in that aspect of life. The way your body looks is how you're showing up with your nutrition, exercise, and healthcare. The way your marriage feels, well, the way you perceive your marriage, I'll say that it doesn't even need to be perfect, but how you perceive and feel your marriage is a reflection of how you're showing up. And all these things are mirrors, and anything you see that you don't like, yes, there's another person or a thing doing that. So there is some kind of like, it's not always your fault, but it's your responsibility to understand. Like, even if someone in your life is a really bad employee or a bad spouse or something, ultimately you still are the one choosing to have them there. It's still you are responsible for that. And so really that has been a key awakening for me, is to realize my identity is not involved in my business.
Mm.
I'm not a flipper. I'm not a wholesaler. I'm not a real estate. I'm not a business coach. I'm not a guy that owns
Mm.
the team building company or that does the master. Those are all just things that I myself, my identity is in me and in my mission in life. God, created this world that we come here for a reason, to provide value while we're, helping the humanity progress forward, and we're learning things as a soul. And that's the way that I see it. And so whenever I lose sight of that and think it's about business or it's about a relationship or it's about something else, I've lost sight of what matters.
So the ultimate question is, how do we find what it is that we want? Because you mentioned that was one of the key questions that you had to answer, that it seems like that's what led you on the journey in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But that alone, trying to figure out what you want, how in the world do you even, unpack something like that? How did you do it?
Yeah, 99% of the people watching this don't know what they want. Statistics will say that 3% of them wrote some stuff down, goals. So they think they know what they want, but it's not what they want. It's just, go ahead.
Let me let To your point, let me just, share just briefly, just me. Like, I am scared. Now, there are certain things I want that I'm pretty clear about, but not big picture stuff, but just like what I would consider to be kind of like smaller things. I'm
Yeah.
going after this one thing. I'm going after this one thing. I'm pedal to the metal. I got a plan. That's the thing about, if you know what you want, you can reverse engineer it. You can create a plan to go and achieve it. But and that's easy. Like if I'm running a race, or if
Mhm.
I'm doing Ironman, or if I'm doing a 100-mile race, which I just did, a few months ago.
Which is
That's
badass,
easy.
by the way.
Thank
That's,
you, thank you, I appreciate that. But that's easy. You can reverse engineer all that. Okay, you want to run a 100-mile race? Well, you're going to need an 8-month runway to go train, and you need a week by week, not only training plan but a nutrition plan.
yep.
You need to be dedicated to. The problem is, Steve, for me, I'm going to speak for me, and then maybe you can figure out how to, intertwine that into your answer. But for me, I feel like I'm scared to even say this is what I want, because I I feel like I might be limiting myself, one, or the reverse or the opposite of that. I feel like I that it's not enough. It's too small. I'm thinking too small. I'm thinking too big, or am I thinking too small? So I'm just like, I'm just gonna go down this path here, and
Mm-hmm.
let's just see what happens. That's how I am, and that's how I feel.
Man, I feel like
And
I
I
feel like
know,
we did.
and Steve, real quick, just one more sentence. And I know in the depths of me that that's wrong. I know that it's wrong.
Yep. I mean, we didn't plan this, but I don't think I could have planted a better way for you to tee that up for that question, because this is so largely over the last, as I kind of found myself over the last 10, going on almost 11 years here, at some point I started realizing I don't know what I want. And this is why, we own a company called Team Architects that I'm biased, but there's nothing like it out there. And it's the stuff that it does to help people hire the right people and then run the team correctly is crazy. And that is because I was colossally horrible at hiring people. And I sought out to fix that problem. I mean, this is how, you know what I mean? Like searching these problems is how things happen. And similarly, I've become like, if you want to get down and dirty about supplements and peptides and vitamins and blood work and your organ health and biohacking and how the mitochondria works and ATP and I mean I largely lost my health because I was on such a bad, path and drank all the time and and just stressed and didn't know what I wanted to do and I had to become, almost an expert on that stuff. And so it's interesting. Similarly, when I didn't know what I wanted, I started setting out on this path to really study that. And I started really, bringing that into the coaching and things that we do. And I realized, oh, nobody knows what they want. I got to help everybody figure this out. Well, largely over the last, again, like I said, over the last like year, I've really figured out a big piece of this, like why this is such a problem. There's many reasons, but currently one insidious one that most people don't ever really figure out is it's so hard to figure out what you really want because we base it on money. We're like, oh, I want to make 100 grand. I want to make 1 million. I want to own 100 houses. I want to, whatever. I want to do 100 grand a month in my business. That is not what you want. Those are like what you need in your business to try to give you the money, time, and influence to have what you want. Even saying I want to spend more time with my family, that's bullshit. Like, where are you going to go? Like you taking them to Disney or like, we're going to do the 3-day weekend every, quarter. And we're twice a year, we're going to do a week. And like, I know you're really intentional about that. And like, how much does that cost? How much time does it take? Who do you need to know to get tickets to the Alabama game? Whatever. Like figuring all that stuff out is time, money, influence. And like your business needs to give you that stuff. And so really, digging so deep into like, what do I really want? It becomes a question that's so hard to answer. Um, that here's a key that I've learned that if anybody takes, if there's only one thing you guys take away from this podcast, in my opinion, the biggest problem with figuring out what you want is figuring out who you are. Like if you don't know who you are, it's nearly impossible to figure out what you want. Here's the good news is this. If you can take what you want away from money, because money's never the thing you want, money's never the problem, it's never the answer.
Right.
It's part of the equation. Like
Yeah.
when you reverse engineer, create a plan, you need it, but it's never the thing, right? So when you can get rid of that and then halfway get into a mindset where you can come up with something reasonable and somewhat like personal and make a why really strong and like decide what, gives you that why fulfillment and all that kind of stuff. Even if it's not right, if it's halfway right, it's better than not having one, having a guiding light, a North Star. And if you start moving forward, the thing is you start doing different things. And as you become that new person, you're figuring what it costs you and requires of you to go towards that goal that you set. If it's again, halfway right, it doesn't have to be perfect. What happens is you start becoming a different person. So you start actually uncovering who you are along the way, which is the real benefit. Figuring out what you're made of to run 100 miles, dude, during your training is infinitely bigger deal for you than it is doing the 100-mile race.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
In the middle of training, when you don't want to go on any further and you figure out why you should and why you're doing it, like that is the real win, correct?
Yes, but it's finite. It's I'm only trying to go here. I'm only trying to train and train and train and train and train and train to get to here. And then once I'm done here, once I've accomplished the thing I set out to accomplish, then it's done. I'm not like going back to figure out who you are. I'm not a I I'm not a runner. I'm not a I'm not a
Hmm.
triathlete. I wouldn't want to be known as those things. Those are things that, and I'm finding, especially the triathlon thing, that was a season of my life that I really needed something consistent
Hmm.
and something I needed discipline in my life and I needed something consistent in my life. And that showed up just by happenstance at the right time. Steve, my biggest problem is going back to figuring out what I want. And I like figuring out who you are. I like that. But my biggest problem is I truly believe I can do anything. Like I applied to law school and got in. I don't think I'm going. I might go. I don't know. It's an option.
Hmm.
But like I can do anything that I want to. I truly believe whatever it is I set out to achieve. And I prove it to myself over and over. 100-mile race, that ain't no joke. You can't just get up and just do that.
No, your body's not supposed to do that.
You can't do an Ironman. You can't just
Yeah.
do an Ironman. You have to actually like work towards that. But I feel like my brain is set up in such a way where I conquered the real estate thing. Now I didn't conquer, I was kind of like you, where once things started getting a little hairy, a little dicey, I didn't want to fix my business. I went and started something else that would try to, complement
We
that.
all do.
Yeah. So, but I did the real estate thing. I'm almost like, okay, once I conquer this, I'm not bored. Maybe that's not the right word, but that's not who I am. That's not my identity. Um, who am I, Steve?
Well, listen, a lot of figuring out who you are is understanding who you're not.
Okay.
So, like, you picked up discipline, you picked up faith in yourself, trust in yourself that you can achieve something. You learned how to reverse engineer a plan. By the way, that's the one of the greatest things in life is to like what I'm working on right now with so many of my clients, and I'm trying to even try to figure out a whole new group and things. I really want to bring this to the world is the ability to really calibrate what you want based on where you are, who you are, right? What's important and how to reverse engineer that, take action steps. It's KPIs, leading indicators, lagging results, all this business crap. It applies to every aspect of your life. And how do you
Yeah.
dumb it down and make it a part of your life so you become the person that just thinks that way? Oh, I have I know who I am. I know where I'm missing in life for fulfillment or purpose. Um, so I know, so I can easily create a target, not easily, but I know how to create a target and I can reverse
Mhm.
engineer that to create intentionality,
Mhm.
which is so important. Expectations always lead to disappointment, but intentions are different. Intentions more about what you want to happen. Expectations are how it's going to happen. And
Mhm.
so many of us get tied to the expectation part of it and we get lost on the journey of how it's going to happen so we don't ever get started or we trash our goal, our New Year's resolutions are trashed by February. Like it's because we're wrapped up in the how instead of the what, and our what isn't aligned with our why, and we don't really know what our why is. Like we think we do, but again, we don't have, so the why is moving around, our what isn't quite lined up. And so we're like, here. And then we're like, all I care about is the how. I get lost in the weeds. And then like you're shot. But even then, again, even if you create the wrong goal and you run towards it, like you're going to learn stuff about yourself and know, like, I don't want to do these things. I
True.
want to let me this will be this might seem like a little bit in left field, but you said the word belief, like you have belief in yourself. Let me drop something here and we'll just let it set in people's heads and then we can like, if you want to dig in, we can, but we can move on.
Okay.
I'm working on this is going to ruffle some Christian feathers, by the way. Sorry. But if anyone out there who isn't strong in their spiritual world where this might bother you, but I feel like there's a hierarchy and belief is at the bottom of this hierarchy because belief means that you have faith. Belief is, I believe this to be true. There's an air of doubt. And since we don't see God or there's things we don't know now, right? Until we die or whatever, or go back, connect, reconnect to divine or whatever you want to say. So this was hard for me because of my upbringing. By the way, I'm not bashing religion at all. Like like I was a Christian for a long time and now I'm spiritual. Like I'm not religious. I understand God, I think, better than ever. And Jesus is literally how I decide how to live my life, is trying to be like him. I pattern my life after what he was doing. So I don't want anyone to think like I'm an atheist or something weird like that. But Jesus wasn't Christian, nor was he a Jew. I mean, the Jews tried to kill him. So did the government. He was so hated and so scared, so revered and all these things. Like everybody was trying to kill him because he saw the problem in the judgmentalness and some of the things like that, right? And so I'm not so sure that some of that's not rearing its head back up. But let me get back to this and say this, because I don't want this to be religious or anything. It's more spiritual.
Yeah.
This is like deep, deep stuff that's really, if you want to talk about mindset, this is the kind of stuff that really locks me in and gets me thinking. Is so with belief, the problem is there's an error of doubt, because you just have to overcome that using faith. In fact, it's such a problem, the church made it a cornerstone. Instead of letting it be the problem, they made it the thing. Oh, you don't have enough faith? It's like the thing they can hit you with, because it is the rub. It's the rub. It's the hard part, which is we don't know. We weren't there when everything went down, when Jesus was here. We're not an angel. We're not connected, all these things. So we don't know. But belief is very strong, very, very strong. We start with that. But if I say, do you believe your mom is your mom, or do you know she is? Like, there's no doubt.
Is it?
Like,
How do I know?
but
But how do I know? I don't know. I've never done.
I think it's based on,
I never done the DNA test.
but I think it's based on the experience level. So belief, the doubt a lot of times comes from not having experienced it yourself. Like you don't know because you didn't do it. Like if you were there, so follow me. Dude,
No,
if you ever took my psychology test, by the way, I can psychoanalyze. Like the skeptical nature is so good because like, and I saw you kind of shaking your head like I don't follow this, but like let me finish it up. But like,
Go ahead.
but it's so this fits right in with where you're at, because you're like already like I don't know if I believe it, which is perfect. Because when we can, instead of like using faith to bypass the doubt, when we can lean into the doubt, which is like I don't know if I trust this, ask a lot of questions and really dig in, we can lead to a different level of knowing by experiencing and asking these questions, instead of just sitting there like a sheep and being like, well, they told me to believe and I don't really know, I just had faith. And so experiencing all these things will allow us to start to know. And this is for me, um, you know, I've been doing things over the last year or so that have really expanded my mind into a deeper level of experience where I've become aware. It's even beyond knowing. And I know this is probably a whole podcast by itself, but I wanted to put this out there for anyone who's ready for this. A bunch of people are going to hear this and be like, I don't know. Anyone who's ready to hear this, it's really going to get them thinking, because like if you smoked your whole life, you know cigarettes can kill you. We all know that because we've been told. It says it on the box. But when you go in and the doctor says you have stage 4 lung cancer and you're going to die in the next 6 months, you are now aware cigarettes can kill you. The progression of belief to knowing to being aware is all mostly driven by your experience level, your personal knowledge of. So for me, that is what's required to really get to know yourself, is to become aware of who I am instead of know who I am, instead of believe who I think I am, right? Like it's this level. So as I bring this stuff together, for me, I put myself in these situations maybe to figure out who I'm not, but also to see what I'm capable of. But all of this is to really become aware of who I am, which is through experience and really getting beyond the doubt. Because the reason I brought all that up is because you said the word believe, but you also talked about the doubt. Maybe it's too big, maybe it's too small. Like when we can't experiment to gain the experience, right? And to get firsthand knowledge, we can't get over the doubt part. We're always going to question. And so a lot of life is just this grand experiment, man, of like figuring out who the heck we are. Why are we here? There's a reason you're here, you know? So I know that was kind of a wild tangent, and I appreciate you letting me get through that, but like it really fits hard with this whole idea of uncovering who you are. By the way, I should be really careful. It's not an active process of like becoming or figuring out who you are. It's actually remembering.
Hmm.
Because your soul is your soul. You were who you were before you came here. Like when God created your soul, he didn't create Brian Tripp. Like like that's a human body that you're in or whatever.
Right.
The way that I see it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that we do as a human that we have to suffer with emotions and all these things. It's part of our experience here. But my point is this is I feel like, and this is again my opinion, figuring out who you are is more of the process of surrendering and aligning to who you were meant to be than it is actively pursuing and creating something. It's more about allowing yourself to align with who you always have been. And all these things like the programming of politics and school, and there's all this stuff in the world to tell you who you're supposed to be.
Hmm.
And people were like, I'm doing all these psychedelics and all these things with shaman. And we talked about that a little bit. People are like, some people might be like, oh, Steve lost his way. Man, I'm actually trying to find my way for that. I've been living some other way, like my whole life, like what I was told about go to college and do all these things. And, maybe for the first time, I'm actually not trying to get out of my own way. I'm trying to like get in my way.
Mm. Mm. No, there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack here.
I know.
As far as belief goes, you're sitting here talking about belief is a part of a hierarchy. I can see that. I don't think you said anything that I don't think that you said anything that is unscriptural or unbiblical. If there are
Oh, I
people who are
didn't.
Christians that are watching this or listening to this,
I didn't.
um,
That was a purposeful comment to preface things because some people shut down when those kinds of things come on.
yeah,
I've just realized it. As soon as they hear it, they think they already know what they know. So they like largely it's the problem with, in my opinion, with some doctrine religions. Like the more you think as soon as you think you have it figured out is when you're screwed. So as
yeah,
soon as you think I already know what I know and someone starts talking about something, you just shut down. You don't listen. That's not what Jesus would do. Jesus was open-minded and unconditional love and listened. And I'm not saying he agreed with everybody. For sure he didn't.
yeah,
But I only said that to allow people to not block it because they
yeah.
think they already know. So they don't listen.
No, interesting. That's but just getting back to belief versus knowing versus it sounds to me like you said awareness is the ultimate. That's the top of the hierarchy, and is that what you're saying? That's what you think, or
I don't know if it's the
that's
top.
your
I just think there's a progression.
that's your
And
yeah, that's your theory.
that's all I know right now. I might know more in 6 months. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
open to all of it now. I'm just
no,
open
and
minded.
but I think that that's important for you to say that. You said earlier you said in the last year you're just now kind of seeing things a little bit differently, maybe a little bit better. In another year, what's going to happen? And I think that's important for you to recognize, for all of us to recognize, and to continue to be open. And I feel like I'm very, very open to anything and everything, all possibilities, because I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know when I said the word belief exactly, or when I used it. Maybe I used it multiple times, but I do know without a shadow of I'm aware, to use your phraseology and your hierarchy, that I am capable of absolutely anything that I put in my mind that I'm going to do. I
That was
will
my
achieve.
point.
I will achieve it.
It's because of, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that was back to that point of like, it's really awesome to have ran 100 miles. That is awesome in itself. But what's more awesome is becoming the person that can do it, is the process of getting there. That's what's created the awareness
Right.
is fighting through all of that. Because if you'd have just went, never trained and somehow miraculously went and ran 100 miles and it was all over, you'd be sitting there being like, I've had this happen. I've done things in ceremonies with shaman. Like later you're like, I don't even know if that really happened. Like, but when you're training for 8 months or whatever like,
Yeah,
there's
there
no
was
doubt in your mind you
right there.
built. Yeah.
There were, I'll just give roundabout numbers. I don't know exactly, but there's roughly 240 people who entered this race, and there was 110, over 100 did not finish the race.
Yeah. I'm surprised it wasn't
And
more.
so it was almost half the field did
Mhm.
not finish the race. And I knew in my mind, now I suffered, some torn ligaments and a few stress
Sure.
fractures, but there was just zero doubt in my mind. I mean, I was finishing the race, but I guess where I'm at today, and maybe Steve, I don't know if you have a comment on this or what you would say to a client you might have in this arena. I do know that I can do anything, but it's almost like a paralyzing thought
Mhm.
because since I can, what the heck do I even do? It's almost like I'm paralyzed to do anything because I can go and do anything. Do I want to devote 3 years of my life to law school? I know I can do it. And if I decide to do it, then I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to get straight A's and I'm going to be the best law student that there ever was. Like that's just who I am. I go all in on anything I decide to do and I've become successful at it. So it's just like I just have to, I guess, make the decision and commit to the decision. I'm just not. I thought I was going to become an activist, with all the stuff that's been happening to me in my personal life with my kids and not being able to see my kids as much and my wife of 10 years leaving out of nowhere and I'm going to become an activist and I'm going to go to law school and get a law degree and start a nonprofit and help other fathers. It's like that sounds awesome. I don't know if I'm the person to even do that. I don't know if that's a burden I want to take on. And if I did take that burden on, how much time I already don't get that much time with my kids. How much more time am I going to lose with my kids? Like right now, I've got so much time. I can go and coach my kids' basketball team and coach my son's baseball team and be at all the events and do all the things. And that's just my priority right now. So I'm just kind of scraping by and just doing a few flips just to keep enough money in the bank, just to do the things I truly want to do right now. So what do I want? I want to spend time with my kids. That's all I want to do.
But you said something. So I got an idea. So let me address something. I'll roll it into another like kind of more philosophical thing. But then maybe we can spin around and talk about some practical stuff. The tendency with me is two things. I either go so high up in the philosophical realms that you do
Right.
have to eat some mushrooms or something to hang with me, or I'm going to go down in the weeds and you probably can't hang with me there either because it's going to be a fire hose in your face and you're going to be
Well,
like, I just needed a little sip of the water. Like
no,
I
no,
didn't want
no.
the fire hose.
I want the fire hose, but I want you to cap it all off with some practical stuff that we can.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do that. Like, but let me address something first. The reason you don't know if you want to go to really go through getting your attorney's license and going through law school is because you finally hit back on it and you said, I thought I was going to be an activist. You're back to who you are. You're unclear in who you are, so that's why you can't decide what you want to do. So that's what I'm saying is this is what the roads are leading back to. This for me is like once you're really clear, if you're like, I know what my mission in life is, and it's
Yeah.
more purpose is more practical. Like my purpose is to do this thing. Like currently, my purpose is to create a bridge to bring practicality, to go into the spirituality world and bring practicality to it and bring that over a bridge into the business world. I'm not trying to grab business guys and pull them back over into this world and make them like sell all their stuff and go work for the church for 40 grand a year and give up their life. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Like my goal is this bridge I'm building is to bring spirituality into the business world because, and by spirituality, I don't mean religion at all. It, it, it is about your divine purpose, but also your temple, your body, like biohacking and like breath work isn't woo woo weird stuff your wife does at yoga. Like breath work changes how your mitochondria works and changes the ATP in your body which gives you more energy than actually drinking coffee. Like, this is dude science. Like, this is practical stuff, right? Go ahead.
Why, why is that important to you?
Well, let why is that purpose important to me?
Yes.
Well, I believe that we're here, to do, again, I think we have a mission when we come here, and it's to evolve humanity to some level, to
You
provide
that's
value to the world.
that you just said I believe.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Good. I like that. Um,
Yeah.
I'm becoming, yeah, I'm becoming so as I'm struggling with that, because it's a belief, right? Um, through things I've been doing over this last year, I'm becoming more aware of how my life has changed when I've realized about purpose and who I am and why I'm here. And I realize that I want to bring that to other people.
Right.
And
Why?
because I feel like that was a mission that was given to me. I feel like my soul wanted to, that was the impact that I wanted to make on humanity when I came here. So there's
So
some fundamental stuff that we're probably not going to get into, that I don't
no,
think life is random. And I think your soul has a mission. And I don't think God says, here's your mission. I think before you come here, your soul is so tethered to divine that it can't make a plan that wouldn't fit with what God wanted. So, like,
I agree with that.
it's so pure. You're so pure, and your soul's like, I'm going to go do this, but I'm also going to learn because I don't know what I don't know. So, this is like college for our soul. But when I come here, I have this mission, and we're not trying to figure out who we want to be and what we need to do our whole life. I think we're trying to remember why we're here. We spend our life trying to, like, get through the programming that's been put in us, and you know, get through the toxins that we're putting in our body that keep us asleep. I can't even, like, if I'm sleepy every day because my hormones are low because of all the crappy food I eat, and I don't work out because I don't take care of my body, and
Right.
I'm drinking at night, and I'm slugging coffee in the morning, right? Like, I'm not in my right mind to even, I'm bouncing all over the place. I can't even, like, sit down and think straight
Hmm.
because I'm just going. So when I can get to that state, I can start to try to again remember why I'm here.
And I hear you saying, and all that makes great sense. I'm trying to figure out, and I think this is the practical stuff. I think sharing your experience and sharing my experience, I think that this is, I mean, this is what I would want to hear. I know in deep down that my identity cannot be wrapped up in my children.
Mhm.
Okay. I absolutely, they're, first of all, they're not even mine. They're mine for like that much time. And they're their own people. They're going to be their own, and it's my job to get them prepared the best I can so that they can become their own person and go and do their own thing. And they are their own, or they're gods. Um, However, I'm spending the majority of my time, all the time I can, with my kids.
Mhm.
And a lot of what I'm doing in my life is about my kids. So my question is, where is your wife fit into all this? Where are your kids are a lot older than mine. Although you still have some in high school, right? You still have a couple of kids in high school.
I don't really believe in school, so
Okay,
they're
let's
at home.
just
They're homeschooled, but my
okay.
homeschooling is not. They're
So,
reading like YouTube algorithm books instead of
okay, they're
like history.
teenagers. You have teenagers.
My twin boys will be 18 in April, and my daughter's 21.
Okay. All right. So you're definitely, I mean, I would think you're at the point to where, your kids are not yours. They're if they're not kind of flying on their own, you're teaching, they're on the verge of being able to be on their own, or at least theoretically speaking. They're not little kids. You don't have to
Yeah.
show up at their, you're not trying to go to their, T-ball games and stuff like that. Although I'm sure they still have things going on. Where are your kids right now in your life versus where were they? And where will they be? Where is your wife in all this? Like, where, these are people that have either come into our lives or we've created that are obviously important to us. They're our family, our immediate family. Where does all that tie into the purpose, the, all the stuff that you're talking about with your mission, your
Mhm.
mission that you feel like you're going back to or returning to versus, finding. How does all this kind of intertwine, or does it? Does
Well,
that
let's,
make sense?
yeah, each one of you, I think you just asked like three things that are all like probably whole day long seminars, but I'll rapid fire some stuff and try to cover that. Um, First of all, so let me just rapid fire a few things. Um, because I think I've got an analogy I want to get back to that I think will really start to hit some things home. But as far as like the kids go, first of all, I used to think like it's a paradox, by the way, which happens a lot where you're like, oh, because I know I can do everything, I don't really do anything. Like, because I can do anything, so I don't do anything. Like, what I mean? It's like if you've got little kids, this movie always reminds me, it's in The Incredibles, if you've watched that movie. There's a line that I love in that movie. The villain is not a superhero, but he's creating all his gadgets so he can mimic superhero powers like fly and shoot laser beams and all these things. And one of the superheroes looks at him and says, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Because once everyone's super, no one's super." Because he felt very left out because he wanted to be a superhero and he didn't have powers. And so he became this villain. And we study this with like our clients with all the psychological testing we do with our team architects company and stuff is like whenever I see someone who's super urgent is one of their personality traits, I'm always like, I already know one of their big problems is if everything's urgent, nothing's urgent.
Hmm.
Because like you come in on fire about everything. And so no one really knows, like, bro, he gets crazy about all the little things. Like
Yeah.
if you can't modulate down to like, oh, I mean, I'm really intense, but this isn't that important. But this one really is. Like you just, if you're a parent and you yell at your kids all the time, they don't really know when you're upset. Right. So it's interesting, like these paradoxes happen. And one of the reasons is duality. This is like the deepest thing I've been struggling with and learning and growing through. But like we as humans, we all think it has to be good or bad, yes or no, day or night. We duality, largely it's what religion's based on. Um, it's this thinking that these thing has to exist and it's black or white.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the reality is, like I had a client the other day, I'll give you an example of this. He was like, dude, some days I want to beat myself up because I made millions and millions of dollars multiple times and my partnerships broke up and I lost it. And then I built it up again, I lost again. And like, you know, half the time I want to kick myself in the balls because I'm so mad that I should own all this, $50 million real estate by now and I should have all this stuff. But the other part of me is, man, I've done a lot of cool stuff. Like this guy particularly wholesaled like $7 or $8 million worth of property one year. Like, and that's a big deal. That's like
Yeah.
running 100 miles is a big deal. Like, there's these things that like we do and we want to like pat ourselves on the back. And what I realize is the problem is you're in this dualistic thinking. You think you have to pick one or the other.
Hmm.
And we do it all the time.
Hmm.
And so we with literally everything. And so, what I told him was it's both, dude. Like you looking backwards, you should give yourself grace for being where you are. Be content. Like you are where you are because of the decisions you made. Even the bad ones you made served you in some way, even if it's to
Yes.
teach you a lesson.
Yes.
Uh, so honor that, give yourself
Mm.
grace, pat yourself on the back, but going forward, kick yourself in the nuts. Like hold yourself accountable. Like it's both. That's why you're conflicted. You don't know which one it is because it's both. Some days it's one, some days it's the other. So like with your kids, like you think you're here to teach them up and like but when you realize they're teaching you as much as you're teaching them and they're one of the reasons you're spending all this time with them is because you're getting more out of it than they are probably and you may not. I know you recognize some of it now but like when you
No,
get to
no, no,
my
that's absolutely true.
I thought for a long time parents teach their kids up and teach them the ways and send them out in the world whatever. That was a thing that I learned a while back, 5 6 years ago. I was like maybe it's 50-50. Now I'm like that kid was in my life for me to change my life.
Yes.
And then I'm like, but wait a minute, but I change. Oh, it's both. It's both. I'm here for them. They're here for like, so all of this stuff with my wife, my kids, all that stuff you said kind of comes to that same thing is that like,
Mhm.
if, if you believe in some kind of divine orchestration in the world, there is no, I believe this to be true currently. and I'm becoming aware of it. I did that on purpose. I'm
No,
saying
I
like,
understand. No, I
because I
get it.
don't know. Like I may like
Right.
literally like drink some ayahuasca next weekend, which I'm doing with some guys in Austin, and come back and be like, Brian, I had it all wrong, dude. I
Right.
met with God and we had a discussion, and he told me like this isn't you got to go back and apologize to Brian's listeners because it was all wrong.
Yep.
But
But I
like,
think it's important that you say
I,
that though. That's a
but
lot
I'm
of awareness to
currently,
say that.
yeah, like I currently believe this. I'm starting to know it. I'm becoming aware of it. Um, but I don't think there's any way that the highest and best decision for you, anytime the highest and best good for you is to make a decision, that decision is ever a bad thing for anyone in your world. So like whenever you're making the right decision for you and the time, it's always also the right decision for everyone else. Even it doesn't mean it's fun. It doesn't mean it feels good. It doesn't mean it's what they wanted. And by the way, most of the time later when we look back on things, the very thing that we were avoiding or didn't want to do was the thing we needed to do. And how many people have
Oh
these
yeah.
stories of like, oh, at the time is the worst thing I thought could happen to me, but now I look back on it and it's exactly what I needed, or it was the catalyst to catapulting me forward. And the situation didn't change. The only thing that changed was our perspective. So
Yes.
yeah, it did suck. So the dualistic thinking is, was it good for me or bad for me? Yes.
Yeah.
At the time it was really bad. Currently it's really good, but it's still kind of bad because if you let yourself ruminate over it, you might start crying again because it still hurt. But it also was really helpful. But when it happened, you didn't know how helpful it was because you didn't have perspective.
Yeah.
You just felt the hurt. But now it's both, and you've flip flopped which one's more of a thing. So with all that, I've had to learn to let go of trying to make decisions for other people, whether it's my wife, whether it's my kids, whether it's my business partners. And I just have to realize the more I can get in touch with who I am, and I'll give you guys a practical, like an analogy for this and bring it into business here in a second, because I think that'll be good to kind of wrap with. But like the more, as long as I keep focusing on understanding who I am and knowing what's in alignment for that person, I know that the stuff with my wife is going to be great.
Hmm.
It's going to be perfect. And by the way, perfect doesn't mean it feels good. Perfect just means it's accurate. It's what was supposed to happen. It's
Hmm.
exactly what needed to happen, what was
Hmm.
supposed to happen. And again, many times like some shit goes wrong in some event or like something, and you look back on it and you're like, bro, that was like one of the things we were trying to avoid. But honestly, it was perfect, dude. Everything was perfect. Like, I'm so glad that happened because it led to this other discussion and it led to this thing, or it led me to finding out I had a problem I didn't even know was a problem. And now I
Yes.
fixed it and things are better. And all of that, I think, answers a lot of what you just said, because if I believe that and I become aware of it, I start to know it, right? I go through this progression of experiencing the fact that, like, man, my kid, what are my kids going to think? And then I go do something and then I realize, oh, they weren't freaked out or they weren't scared. Or my wife, as I grow spiritually in one direction, I was really worried about letting go of our marriage and not staying focused on things. And
Mm.
as soon as I did that, worked on herself. And then we both like our ways. Like, it's so funny how everything like the very thing I wanted to do was hold on to us and keep us together as I grow. But as soon as I let go of the idea, the codependency part of marriage, which is, by the way, marriage is basically codependency. It's like functional codependency, by the way. Uh, as soon as you let go of that, and I'm with her because I love her, but if she loves me, I should do my thing, and it's not one or the other. We should both work on who we should be, and hopefully we align in who we are, but we need to work on who we are alone.
Hmm.
And once I did that, once I did it with my kids, once I realized they're probably more powerful than me eventually, like they got their own paths.
Yeah.
We're both here for each other. Anyway, all that stuff really came together, and although it's on my mind, um, if I just keep getting back to trying to continually become more and more aware of who I really am,
Hmm.
I will know more of what I want and why I want it,
Hmm.
and then the how presents itself over time.
Sure.
And then these things like marriage, kids, all stuff, it really takes care of itself. I mean, honestly, if you had to become someone you're not to keep your kids happy or your wife, you're going to resent it and it's not the right thing.
For
And
sure.
even if getting a divorce was not fun and I know it was really hard for you what you went through, but the reality is, like, once you became more of who you needed to be, like, you realized that was holding you back, and you were probably holding her back in some way. And even if she needs to go act a certain way, or do a certain thing, she needs to go learn her own lessons, and you needed to go learn your own lessons. And we
True.
all have consequences to our lessons, and those teach us things. And that's how
True.
we evolve as a soul, right?
No. No,
So
I
you
think
want me,
it's
can I
no, I
throw
think
a
it's all
practical
great.
analogy on it?
Yeah, come on, let's go. I
So
want to
I know we're,
respect your time. I know we're up against the clock, but
let me tell you guys, all that stuff we just talked about is so high level, like so philosophical, whatever. Let's like, here's some practicality. All that stuff is, I feel like, you know, in a GPS, this has been hitting home with a lot of people, Brian, is people always are like, oh, you can't, they use this analogy like in business. Like if you don't have your destination plugged in, you can't get the navigation to
right,
get there, right? And
right,
everyone's
right,
focused on what you want, like where you're headed.
right.
That is true. But if I was going to drive to Florida from Indiana, I just need to know I'm going to Florida to get started. Like, in fact, I can drive for like 15 hours, which is 85% of the way there. I can just head, I'm going to take the same highways. It doesn't matter where I'm going to Florida. So, like, one misnomer we have is getting the exact destination dialed in. We need our general destination. And
Yes,
we can start taking massive action and go most of the way, right?
yes.
Um, but here's the one thing we can't do. If the GPS doesn't have your current address plugged into it, it can't even tell you which turn to make first. Like it literally, if you don't know where you are, which is who you are. So in business, we have, you know, we look at a lot of these guys that come in and they want to focus on their goals and all these things, but I always take them back to this horrible audit. I I make them audit their last 6 to 12 months. How many leads did you get? How many deals did you do? How much revenue? What were your expenses? What are your employees? Where are they good? Where are they bad? All these things. We log it all, and then we like basically add up 6 months worth of everything and divide it by six and take the averages, and we're like, that's who you are. You're just the average of your past performance for the last 6 months in your
Right,
athleticism, in
right.
your health, in your business, and everything. It's just the average of what's really happening. It's not who we pat ourselves on the back sometimes when we shouldn't. We beat ourselves up when we shouldn't. We're not really clear on who we are, what we're good at, what we're not. We're not, you know, I mean, we don't look at ourselves the way we might someone else and be able to give advice to someone else. We're not good at that. So if I can assess really thoroughly where I'm at, it's a really high indicator of who I am,
Mhm.
how I'm showing up.
What are Steve? What are some? And I appreciate that analogy. It's a great analogy. What are some KPIs, for lack of a better
Mhm.
phrase, or what are some things I should be looking at specifically to try to answer the question, "Who am I?" Like if we're trying to figure out who you are in business, I want to know how many calls are you making, how many leads are you getting, how many appointments are you going on, how many contracts. What are the KPIs I should be looking at in my own
Yeah, I mean,
personal life?
you know, that's a tougher one. But you got to come up with a rating system. Like
But what
again,
are we rating? Like
so
what are the
so that's
categories? What are the things that we're actually
it
like?
almost in a way it doesn't matter. Like
Hmm,
because accuracy is always this is another thing to write down. Accuracy is always less important than consistency and clarity, right? And so if I worry about being clear, now listen, you can't irresponsibly have no accuracy. Most of us already know more than we need to know, correct?
no doubt.
Okay. So given the fact that most of the people are humans are smart, intelligent beings, by the way, we already know more than we need to know. So the reality is like you're not probably going to make some horrible decision. Like unless if you make a halfly sane decision with some decent level of advice and research, you're probably the accuracy of your decision isn't going to be grossly off. Like it's going to be roughly like hopefully not horrible. And if it is, that's what you needed to do because you're going to learn a bad lesson, but
That's
it's the
true.
lesson you needed, right? So, but the point is, just pick something, stick with it, and then start consistently over a period of time, accurate or clearly picking what you're going to consistently track. So maybe you wake up every day and you just write down what you're grateful for and see how many things you get to before you run into a wall and count how many things you're currently grateful for, and then track on average how many things can you write down. How many hours did you sleep? You know, I track, you know, how many, you know, maybe trips you take, if that's what floats your boat, how many times you go to the gym, how many, pick something that you feel like is important to you, that
Hmm.
is helping you become who you need to be and making you
Hmm.
feel good, even if it's not, dude, even if you were completely wrong and you're like, I think drinking soda is smart. And so I'm going to track how many sodas I drink. Well, if I'm also tracking how much I weigh and how I feel, eventually I'm going to be like, oh, I feel like shit every day. I feel sluggish. I'm getting fat. Like I'm have sugar toxicity. And like you'll realize I had a bad goal with tracking
Right.
ops. So maybe I should track water is good for you. But all roads eventually will lead to the accuracy of just taking action and moving forward. And so if I can leave you guys with anything super practical, again, it's this idea that KPIs, all that is a language that speaks to you understanding how to take action and move towards a goal. So KPIs are just what steps, leading indicator, activities lead to result, lagging indicators, which are results. So like, how do I just start to study what steps lead to results? And are they ones I want? Or are they not? I learn from it, I readjust, and I keep going, but I consistently keep tracking the same things over and over again. I trying new things, trying different ways to do it. And I'm like, oh, I got what I wanted faster this time. Oh, I got what I wanted, but it took longer, cost me more money or whatever. And so, the help, like your feelings are the hardest ones, but you for sure can create a thing. It's just like, there's even apps that do this. Like literally you can open up your calendar and click a happy face, a straight yellow face, or a red frown. And then
Yep.
over time it adds it up and it shows you on average, it tells you if you were happy during. My daughter did this. It's how I learned it. We were doing this annual planning thing with her when she was starting to get older. And like I was able through that to learn with her, like she's very happy during two times. When we go to a lot of concerts together and go to like Broadway in New York, or go to a music festival, when she has something like that to look forward to that's creative and spending time with people that she cares about, and during warm weather months. And so we realized for her to be more happy, a KPI was, let's look at the cold weather months,
Mm.
get the heck out of Indiana and go do something fun. Let's find music festivals to do during cold months in warm cities.
Yeah.
But that came from her tracking, like just literally clicking a green, yellow, or red face every day in an app. And then it added it up and it showed her, like, on average, you clicked green more often during these times. And we just sat there and thought to ourselves, well, what was going on during those times?
Mm.
Right. And so, when you're anxious or avoidant in your relationship, you know, when you're uncomfortable being at home, if your marriage isn't going well, you're pacing around your house, you don't even want to be there. So you stay at work. And
Right.
when you have days like that, pay attention to it. When you have days where you're just happy to be there and you go to bed grateful, like pay attention to that. I mean, there's a way to track anything.
For sure. No, I mean all that is smart. It's practical. It's applicable, and it's good, actionable stuff, which is what I like.
Yeah, mindset's hard, man. Like, I, I just think that if we focus on the fact that, why do you, I'll say this, this is a deep, deep mic drop bomb at the end here. What I currently feel like is, I currently believe, I'm starting to know, I'm not fully aware. If I use my hierarchy, um, everything's about love, man.
Mm.
What Jesus was about, God created the world out of love. And if you ask yourself, why am I doing this? It will always come back to love. You're either, if you're being love, being it, like
Hmm.
I am just love,
Hmm.
which is, which if I could go all the way to be Jesus, I'd be unconditional love for anybody. Doesn't mean I don't hold them accountable. Doesn't mean I don't. In fact, if I love them, I might be more rough on them than I might be as someone else. If I'm not being love, I'm seeking it. And in the seeking is where a lot of problems happen. What we think of as problems, but the reality is the problems are what we need to learn the lessons which bring us back to love. I know this is deep, but my point is you start a business to make money, to have things to make you feel better about yourself, to spend time with people you care about. Like at some 6, 7, 8 whys deep, if I keep saying why, Brian, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do that? What, it always comes back to the love. So money's never the thing. Love is always the thing. If those are the only two guiding principles that you can like put in your life, right? And then know in the middle, I'm just here to figure out why I'm here, to
Mhm.
remember why I'm here. And I want,
Mhm.
the more I know myself, the better I'll make decisions towards what I want. To me, that is, and all these things that you do to get there, whether it's meditation, whether it's diving into religion or spirituality, or whether it's reading books, or whether it's going to seminars or doing, mushrooms, or all these, it doesn't matter. Those are all just tools and things you're doing to try to get your mind into a place where you can focus on who am I? Why am I here? And it's always like love is always a thing and money's never the thing. And like those two
Yeah.
guiding forces, and then me knowing that I'm trying to figure out why I'm here to make a difference in the world, that's true mindset in my mind. And I know that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have anything else figured out. If you just keep those basic guiding principles in place, like over time, a lot of other things, you'll work things out.
I feel like this needs to be like a Joe Rogan special, like we need to go 3 hours.
I can't do
Uh,
that, but I can get back on more times. I can't do that
yeah,
today, but
yeah, no, let's do it for sure. Because I mean, you definitely want to. I've got a bunch of follow up questions based on that because there's a whole thing around happiness that I don't even want to get into because it's a whole other can of worms. But Steve, let's end it right there because I want to respect you, respect your time. But I appreciate you so much. I've learned a lot. I'm going to go back and listen to this actually, just try to kind of piece together. Kind of got some makeshift notes here, but want to kind of piece some stuff together. But can't thank you enough, and thank you for the friendship that we've been able to build over the past 4 or 5 years, and I guess 2, 3. It all started at Clubhouse. If we can
I was
believe
gonna say,
that.
who would have known at
This
like midnight when we're in a room having some conversation in Clubhouse, and you're
this
like, "Who is
clubhouse
this guy? How
phenomenon
do we not
during
know each other?"
COVID. It was like what had to have been like 2000, I guess, or 2020 during COVID. But
Listen, one of those masterminds I told you I'm on the board for, is because of you, because you had me at an event, and it was like all these people talking about business, and I was like, "I'll come speak at it, but can I talk about therapy?" And you're like, "Yeah, man, it's always been about this. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like in the face, like your
yeah,
business will always benefit from this." But
yes,
I want to, as I say bye, I want to say one thing to your listeners. Uh, if you're not following Brian, make sure that you dig into that, because Brian, your attention to detail and your ability to listen and your desire to try to bring people on and do things, like, even if you don't see it, this is part of your calling. Maybe it'll evolve over time, but like you are leading people to water. Like you are, you know what I mean? Instead of trying to be like, here's a drink, like a lot of what you're doing is trying to advance people. If you don't recognize that, I do. And if you guys are, when you're following Brian, make sure you understand this, because I know you're running, live events and you're doing all these things, and you don't even know why. Why do I run a Rio? Why did I do that? Like you may have these weird unguided things in your head about it, but the reality is like you're trying to help a lot of other people, and you do, and you're inspiring with your Grand Canyon, double backs and your 100-mile races. And so just keep up what you're doing. I appreciate you. I know it's making a difference.
thank
And
you.
yeah, man, I'm always, as you know, whenever you hit me up, like I'm always ready for this kind of thing. So we
Awesome.
definitely got to do it again.
Definitely will sooner than later because I've got a lot of follow up stuff. But thank you for those kind words. Appreciate
Yeah,
you,
man.
Steve Richards. Real quick, how can people get a hold of you? What's how can people get in touch with you? They want to learn
You
more.
know, I'm almost a 50-year-old man, so obviously Facebook is probably where I the Insta Snapgram. I'm on there every once in a while, but there I've got if you search theceonation.com/links, you can set strategy calls up. You can find my social media links.
Yeah.
Everything is there. But find me on Facebook is probably the best way.
Okay. We'll link all that up, theceonation.com/links. We'll put that in the description. Guys, make sure you get in touch with Steve. If any of this resonated with you, you will not regret it, obviously. Steve, thank you. Appreciate you, my friend. Until next time, we'll see you guys.